Hey guys, in this tutorial I want to show you how to simplify light and shadow for digital painting. Real quick, I'm just going to go over some brush settings. I use the chalk brush in Photoshop, the textured chalk brush, with shape dynamics turned off and transfer turned on at 100% opacity. Transfer is basically just brush sensitivity. Like, the harder I press on the stylus, the more paint will come on the canvas, as you can see. I just really like this brush because it's really easy to blend colors together, as you can see, and it doesn't really matter what brush you use. I'm just really going over light and shadow. Those techniques you can use with any brush in your style, I guess, but this is just the brush that I personally like to use. Alright, so before we get to painting a face, because painting a face is really complex, I'm just going to go over how I simplify light and shadow. And I know you've seen this like 1,000 times, but I'm just going to show you my method. I basically start with the base color, I add in a drop shadow for this example, then I usually start with the shadows. And for some reason I spent a lot of time painting the shadow on the sphere. I just basically use a cooler color, which means I take that slider, I move it towards the blues section, and then I get a little bit darker and I paint in the shadow. The next step, I add in the light. When, whichever color your light source is going to be, it's going to affect your subject. In this case, I'm just using a white light on a skin color. Then I blend it in. After that, I layer it up. I use a highlight, which is a little bit brighter. And then after this, I add the specular highlight, which is just like the really bright part on the skin. And it's just a stylistic choice that I like to do. Then I add in a fill light. In film, most of the time, when there's shadows, hard shadows, they cool the shadows with like a cooler color, or they just fill in the shadows with that light. And then I added in a rim light here, which is just the edge, just an edge light. Next, I want to go over how light hits a face. I use this app called Handy to set this up. This is basically a standard way of how filmmakers light their subjects. It's basically just splits the light and the shadow pretty much right in half down the face. And I'm just showing you where all the light hits the subject. And then I'm going to show you the highlights where the light catches the skin at the most. And then as you can see on the other side of the face, there's fill light in the shadows. They usually to fill up the shadows. This case I used a teal color because skin usually falls on the orange side of the color wheel, and an opposite of orange is teal. It's a complementary color. Now we're going to start painting the face. The first part is just me setting up my workspace. I basically select the skin color, I lock the transparency so I don't color outside the lines, set up my reference, and I start painting in shadows. The color palette I'm using is basically the Zorn palette, which is I'm not really going to get into that in this video. It's just, it's a way a painter created skin colors. I'm sort of using that, but I'm kind of just using the Coolorus slider that I got there, which is a plugin for Photoshop. You don't need it, but I like it. I like to have it there. Now I'm adding in my light. And I'm just studying my reference, adding in all where the light is catching on the face, just filling all those areas and just blocking in my color. And now you see me add green towards the bottom part of the face there. And that's because there are actually zones of the face. I learned this from a book called Color and Light by James Gurney. Basically by the eyes, the nose area on the face, there's more red showing through the skin because of the blood. And bottom side, the bottom part of the face, the mouth, the sides of the cheeks, is green because of the facial hair. It usually comes off like a bluish green. Now I'm starting to add in highlights. I find the easiest way to add these in when you're looking at a reference is to kind of squint at your reference and you kind of see where the brightest spots are on the subject, and I kind of base it off that. That helps a lot usually. You also see me, I press Alt a lot on the keyboard, which basically samples my color, and I basically blend. That's how I blend colors. I'll kind of use my paintbrush and I'll keep painting, and then I'll alt select the color and I'll blend like that with the eyedropper tool. It's basically the shortcut in Photoshop for the eyedropper tool. Now I'm adding in the highlights. It's based on my reference. The nose catches a lot of light. Now I'm adding in more green for the cheek there because I didn't like it. The eyes, adding in more shadow. Now I'm doing the neck, so I didn't even start that yet. The eyebrow. Adding more highlights. And there I'm adding in the light. Usually in this type of lighting scenario, the light catches like in between the eye and the nose. There's always a really bright spot there, like a really nice highlight there. You can kind of see it on my reference there on the screen on the right. Now I turned off my reference because I kind of just want to make my own adjustments because I've studied this reference a lot. I'm adding in like a pinkish red by the eyelid there. I just feel like doing that makes it look a little bit more realistic. Like I said, it's usually more red towards the eyes and the nose. I usually jump around a lot. I tried to stay step by step, like highlight, light, and all that stuff, but I'm adjusting all my highlights because I didn't like the way they looked. And I'm just using my line art as a guide for the face. Still adjusting those highlights. The top part of the lip. Selecting colors. Now I'm adding a little red by the cheek, blending it. Fixing my shadows over there. I constantly zoom in and out, studying my reference, switching back and forth, making sure everything's looking good. Added more of that green by the neck. Now start on the eyes. Now I'm adding in the fill light. It's basically just a standard way of how filmmakers cinematographers light their subjects. In this case, like I said before, I use the teal color. It just makes the shadows, makes the picture look a little more interesting because I use the complementary color. I feel like it makes it pop a lot. Just basically using my lines as a guide, checking the reference, going back and forth. Now I'm starting to add in the rim light there. That's basically just a light behind the subject. It creates like a rim, an edge light on the face. Really separates them from the dark background there. And now what I just did is I merged my line art to the layer underneath, which is all where paint is, and I just paint over the lines. Take away all my black line art. And this is what makes it look like a painting. I usually sometimes I'll erase it before I merge it sometimes, but I leave some of the lines because I need them as a guide, like by the eyes and stuff over there. You see, I add in the shadow underneath the eyelid and redefining it. Some artists they don't even use the line as a guide. They just delete it altogether and just paint over it. But I'm not that confident with my painting sometimes, so you see me just paint over all the lines. What I suggest you do to practice this is maybe take a still from a movie you like or a video game you like with good lighting and try to imitate it, try to repaint it. Because if you use reference, if you ever get stuck while painting and something doesn't look right, the answer is always right there in front of you, and you are going to learn. The more you do it, the more you're going to learn. That's what I think helped me get better at painting, because I used to paint without reference, and I didn't like the way it looked, and I'd be like, why does it look like this? So when I started using references and understanding light and how light hits faces and other objects, I think that's when I started to get better, and I understood lighting. I really just studied lighting. If you know good lighting, you can probably paint very well. So I'm just finishing this up here, covering up my line art, the rest of it. If you guys like what you see, you can like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions, you can ask me. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks, guys.